Welcome to On the Chain.
So Ripple's working with the Bank for International Settlements on Payments Task Force. And what interesting is, like, the BIS, I actually had it wrong. That was like it's BIS for Bank of International Settlements, but the Bank for International Settlements. So there you go. The task force here. So this is kind of an interesting sort of a development here. What do we have? Let's see. I wanted to go into, so the BIS Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructures announced the membership of its cross-border payments, interoperability, and extension task force. For further details, look here. I think I have that queued up. Hopefully I have that one over here. Yeah, there it is. So cross-border payments, interoperability, extension task force composition. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. So if you see the chairs, there's some of the task force members themselves. And as you can see, there's a pretty good mix in there, but you can see Renee Hutchins from, she's the Director of Payment Operations for Ripple. You also have Saskia DeVolder from Swift. You got Payments Canada in there. You got the Clearinghouse, THC, Worldline's in there. Pan Africa Payment Settlement System goes as PAPS. So there's a whole bunch of them in here. Finality International, Iberpay. So it's what are your thoughts about this? And Ripple having a seat at this table here?
I think it's hugely indicative of the impact that Ripple is having and expects to have. So I believe there are multiple task forces under the BIS. This one's on financial infrastructure. So if you think about that, why they're not bringing Ripple in because they want to know about XRP. They're bringing Ripple in because they know that they have made headway in the broader infrastructure side. So part of it is being regulatorily compliant. Part of it is having the right tech stack and part of it is having the right connections and relationships to be able to tie all these disparate things together. The fact that there aren't any of Ripple's big competitors in that list.
I was going to just say that, Mark. You notice something very interesting. There are no other blockchain companies on here. There are some other payment like Wise, which recently rebranded as Wise. They formerly were TransferWise, but they just moved to Wise. They've been doing transfers mostly peer-to-peer, person-to-person, but that's why they're at the table. You got things like Nubank, Deutsche Bank is there, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Bank of China. But the only one that I noticed on this list in the blockchain space is Ripple.
That's right. So you've heard people say before that the reason public-private partnerships are so important is because governments don't innovate. Private industry innovates, then governments adopt. It's kind of, from what I understand, it's a similar thing with banks. The banks move slow. They're very conservative and cautious. Yeah. And so if somebody else, a smaller, more bleeding edge type player, develops a new technology or a new process that can give them a competitive edge, then they'll test it and maybe adopt it. So if you go back to that list, you'll see there are big banks in there: Societe Generale, Wells Fargo, Bank of Australia, I believe. Anyway, so there are big banks there. So you take those out of there: Bank of China, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Deutsche Bank, and so forth. You take those out, and you're really left with a very small list of tech partners, Ripple being probably the main one. So I think that says huge things about how BIS in particular sees Ripple's potential and the technology that Ripple brings to the market.
Yeah, and also too, I noticed MasterCard's here. You don't see Visa, you don't see Amex, but if you look at who sits on there, Alan Marcard, who's the executive VP for Transfer Solutions, right? Kind of fits right in. So this is another one that came out just recently in the last couple of days. Oops, sorry about that. There we go. But the ISDA, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So there was a story that Ripple had joined the ISDA, which is the International Swaps and Derivatives Association, I believe. Basically, it's about 1,000-member organization that has the major financial players globally as members. Ripple is an associate member, so if you'll see right there in the center what that means, I think that gives us some more cues to why Ripple is there. So designed for service providers, key components of the derivatives market infrastructure, like we just talked about, such as technology solution providers, exchanges, intermediaries, clearing organizations, and repositories, including law firms, accounting firms, and so forth. So if you really dig into that associate members list, you'll find law firms like Sullivan Cromwell and some others that we know. But you don't find a huge number of the tech companies like Ripple. One other one that jumped out at me that I thought, that's interesting, is R3 is also, I believe, an associate member.
R3 is also in there. Yeah, they are.
So do you have the that visual capitalist graphic available that shows sort of the size of the derivatives market?
Let me pull it up. I'll pull it up here for.
So if you've been in the space for a while, you've seen this before. They updated this, I think, in 2022. So that first little square, which is almost impossible to see, that's $100 billion, which is just an ungodly big number to begin with.
Yeah, that was Sam Bankman-Fried's peak net worth right there. So there it is. There he was, $1 billion. You had sports teams.
So, yep. So the big square is 100 billion. The Sam Bankman-Fried one is somewhere smaller than that, but
$340 billion is what you got professional sports teams. I think it's probably bigger than cryptocurrency after hitting the peak of 2.8 trillion in November 21, 760 billion today.
Yep.
You got Russia versus Ukraine GDP. Obviously, that's pretty stark in comparison. 1.8 trillion was the Russian economy. You got military spending. You can see the U.S. and China, and then everyone else, right? So it's like, yeah, there's a lot. But if you look at the currency, the U.S., Euro, China, Japan, and then everybody else, you can see a lot of the same players in there. That's $8 trillion. Then we start talking about gold. Gold right here, using they're doing $1,750 an ounce. That's 11.5 trillion. And then these are the below ground reserve. I like how they have below ground reserves over here, right?
Yeah.
And look what makes up the most of that. Jewelry, way more than bars and coins.
Yep.
There's just jewelry is everywhere. It's tiny, but it's distributed all over the place. At the world's billionaires, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Arnott, Gates, Buffett. This is 12.7 trillion.
Yep.
We got the central bank balance sheets. Now, I think this is complete BS. I think until we audit the Fed, Central European Bank, People's Bank of China, and Bank of Japan, because I think we'll be pleasantly surprised by what we actually find. And I'm saying that fraud probably exists across the board, probably even worse with the US Fed. But according to this, we're at 28 trillion. Is that right?
Yep.
That can't be right. We're at 30. How can we be at 28 trillion? That doesn't even make sense. That's what their balance sheets look like, 28 trillion collectively. Look at the S&P 500, pretty massive. Look at the comparison by that, $36 trillion. And fake paper payments, right? It's like, if I was like, this guy's worth $2 trillion. Yeah, on paper, okay, but it's not really going to be liquid anytime soon. And so, just look at this. So you look at Apple up at the top, all the way down to Visa, but look at the players. You've got Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, United Healthcare, Tesla. We want to talk about inflation. That Tesla, that's a lot of, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson, Exxon, and Visa. Then we get into U.S. versus China GDP. U.S. economy was 23 trillion. Chinese economy was 17 trillion. Check out the global money supply, 48.9 trillion. This includes coins, banknotes, and checking deposits. You got the broad money, that's 82.6 trillion. Got the stock market, the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, Shanghai, Euronext, Japan, and then everything else. That's pretty massive in itself. Then we get to the good part, Mark.
It's huge when you go back and think each square is $100 billion. Each one is $1,000 million. And
Right.
then
And
you start
$1,000 billion. Like you can't even think about what 1,000. It's hard enough for $1,000 million, let alone $1,000 billion and being a trillion.
Yeah.
Global debt adds up to 300 trillion. I think that might be an understatement.
But wait, it gets better.
Oh wait, there's more. Governments. So look at the ballooning debt right here. Non-financial corporates are 16%. Governments are 22%. The financial sector is 10%. Households are 14%. And that's climbing, by the way. This is 2022. 2023 is a worse picture, as illustrated by your first tweet that we started with. Then you've got the global real estate, residential, $259 trillion globally in value. But again, China is the world's most valuable residential market. You got the agricultural, 35 trillion, commercial, 33 trillion. And then you got the global wealth, $463 trillion. Look at that. Look at Europe. That's cool when you think about each one of those $100 billion. And look at China. Asia Pacific, India, Latin America, and Africa. It's so crazy that Africa, being one of the largest continents, has really been shafted since the beginning of time. It's really, and then you have every other country over there that has completely just taken advantage since the beginning of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's, we're not going to talk about it today, but when you start talking about the impact that that BRICS could have, since so many countries in the global South are members of BRICS or trying to become members of BRICS, then the trade block gets pretty massive.
Look at the derivatives market.
This is where it gets interesting.
12.4 trillion. And two ways to measure. Derivatives are typically measured in two different ways. You got gross market value or notional value. The notional value of derivatives is now estimated to be $600 trillion. What?
That's 600 million.
That's crazy time. Examples: future contracts, forward contract, options, warrants, swaps. Man. Keep scrolling. It says keep scrolling.
That kills me. That kills me.
Keep scrolling. I mean, that's a lot to visualize. Collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps are now derivative types, and for their roles in the 2008 meltdown. But yeah, that's cool, man. It's a really good graphic. I appreciate you sharing that.
So who handles all of these derivatives? The members of the ISDA.
Yeah, they do.
Which Ripple just joined.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.